Okay, folks, so this is the government or choosing a type of government part of the Creating Utopia project. You might think that your language arts teachers are a little crazy, and you're right. However, this is a really good and important and powerful part of your choices in creating a quote perfect society, which is the goal. So there's a lot, and we're going to go through them one by one with examples. So the first type of government, going from top down, is the military dictatorship. So examples are Pakistan, countries, which are two countries, Pakistan and Sudan. The head of state, or the decision makers, the people who have the power, is the dictator. And he's always a guy who's like a military person. The source of power and how it is acquired in this government, it is usually through a coup d'etat, which means the military took control of the government by force. Freedoms of the people are determined by the dictator, the ruler. And the advantages and disadvantages. So the advantages of this type of government is you, as the leader, have absolute control as dictator, and nobody can tell you no. And you also have a pretty strong military because, like, you succeeded in taking control, right? Disadvantages of this type of government is, well, you're not very popular because you took control, without anybody's permission or consent. And people are actively trying to get rid of you as a ruler because you tend to be not the best sort to be in charge. And you also tend to have a population that can't read or write, because dictators don't like it when that happens because, it's easier to rebel. Coup d'etat, by the way, in French means hit of state. So you're hitting the state. You're hurting it, in other words. Very fancy, very French. The second type of government is an absolute monarchy. So North Korea is an example of this, and Saudi Arabia. The head of state is the king and or the queen. The source of power is, you're going to learn about this in social studies in social studies this year, but it's something called divine right. So basically, whoever the society is calling or labeling as God or worshiping, divine right is the rule where it's like, well, that God told me that I should be king. So, like, God told you should be king. You can't really argue against a divine power like that. So it's a pretty powerful thing to claim, and that's kind of how the English monarchy worked for a long time. Freedoms are determined by the king and or the queen, kind of like the dictator. The advantages of this type of government is you have absolute control because, God put you in charge and people can't really disagree with that. The disadvantages are people don't really have rights if the monarch is a jerk and doesn't care about people. You might get like a good monarch, but it's rare. And the other disadvantage is the likelihood of not surviving your rule is high because people might be unhappy with your rule. See the French Revolution, where, it didn't end well for the royal family. The third type of government is a constitutional monarchy, which is different from an absolute monarchy. An example of that today is the British monarchy. So if you've ever heard of Queen Elizabeth, the monarchy still exists, but they're not really in charge anymore. They gave up their power. So the head of state, or the decision makers, is technically the king and queen and or queen, and a guy called the prime minister, who's kind of like the president. He's elected. Source of power and how it is acquired. It's a little bit still divine right because that's how kings and queens are still selected. But it's also determined through something called a constitution and elections. So we have a constitution and elections in our country, but we do not have a monarchy in the United States. So we are not a constitutional monarchy. Freedoms are determined by something called a Bill of Rights, which is basically connected to the Constitution. It's a document that everybody sort of signed and agreed, like, yes, we do want the right to free speech, and we do want the right to practice whatever religion we want, etc. Advantages of this type of government: the monarch shares power with an elected person, so people are super duper much happier than just if the monarch was by themselves and said that they were in charge because, someone put them in charge and not the people. People also have rights, like the right to free speech, the right to marry whoever they want to, the right to be educated, etc. So they tend to be happier. The disadvantages of this type of government, though, is it is so much harder to get anything done as a leader because you have to share your power, which means it just takes a lot longer to make decisions. The fourth type of government, the next type of government, is a representative democracy, otherwise known as a republic. We are a republic. The United States of America is a republic. The head of state is a president. The source of power and how it is acquired is a constitution and also through elections, right? The president's son doesn't become the next president like it works with kings. Every president is elected by the people. Freedoms are determined by also a Bill of Rights, like a constitution's. The advantage of this type of government is people have rights and are happier. And power is shared with the elected leader and the people, which makes people happier. Okay, they feel represented, they feel that it's fair. Disadvantages is very similar to constitutional monarchy, is it also takes a very long time to get anything done, because not only that people have rights that you can't violate, you can't break those rights, but also because you don't have absolute control, so people can tell you no, and people have lots of opinions, and it takes a while to get stuff done. Last but not least, the last type of government that you can choose is a direct democracy. So we don't actually have any modern examples of this anymore. The only one that y'all might know is ancient Greece. So there is no one in charge. There's no head of state in a direct democracy. All of the people make decisions collectively. So the source of power and how it's acquired is all citizens, and you also have elections. Freedoms are determined by all the citizens. There's no one in charge. The advantages to this type of government is there's no one leader. Every citizen votes on everything. The disadvantages to this type of government, though, is because there is no one leader, it is almost impossible to make decisions if your population is large. For example, it worked in ancient Greece because the only people who could vote were land-owning men. So that was a very small population, maybe 100 people. So if 100 people have to get together to vote and everybody gets one vote, that could work, sure. But if you take the United States of America, where are you going to put 30 million people in a room? Like how the logistics alone makes it direct democracy. It just doesn't make a lot of sense because our population is so big. So, and that's it. Those are your 5 types of government that you can choose from. There's way more than that in the world, but for simplicity's sake, just choose from these 5. If you have any questions, email or send myself or Mrs. Alexander a Schoology message. We are happy to talk to you more about this. And have fun!